and we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you are here for Geoffrey Moon's presentation, Fixing Mindsets, Gifted Education, Working to End Racism and Classism in Public Schools, then you are in the right place. Geoffrey Moon serves as past president for the New Mexico Association for the Gifted. He received his bachelor's degree in theater arts from Southwestern College in Kansas and his master's degree in Western New Mexico University in special education with an emphasis in gifted education. Geoffrey was recently honored as 2019 NAGC Gifted Coordinator Award winner for working with school faculty, developed a continuum of aligned program options for gifted students in Santa Fe, where he is the Gifted Education Program Support Specialist at Santa Fe Public Schools. Geoffrey advocates for meaningful education that challenges every student every day. He is passionate about developing talent and potential in students from all backgrounds. He supports identification and high-quality education for gifted students from traditionally underrepresented and disadvantaged groups. He is the author of the NM TAPAS, or New Mexico Talent and Potential Assessment System. Ladies and gentlemen, as I like to call him, Geo, the OG of GT in NM, it is my true pleasure to introduce Geoffrey Moon.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Corey. I don't know when I became the old man in this game, but what a hoot. All right, you guys. So today we're going to talk about fixing mindsets. And before we get started, I have to tell you that when I was originally asked to do this keynote, I was waking up or revising an older sort of workshop on mindsets in the way that Carol Dweck talks about them. The way I'm talking about them today includes some of that, but includes a lot of other things too. And as I was putting this together, it occurred to me that there's actually a song about this topic. Do you guys know the song? Thanks, Katrina. That's what I mean. And of course, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of spending money to get it right, child. But we're gonna be here to do that today. And so let me share my slides with you. Can you guys see that okay? All right, and I'm going to plug in my headset so that you don't hear my lovely four-legged and two-legged family members.
All right, fixing mindsets. A note before we go on. This presentation had a previous title, and the title was one that was just about classism. I was out for a walk with my wife one morning, Carmen, and I said, Carmen, you know, I really think that in a moment like this, we've got to talk deliberately about racism, but I'm a little reluctant to do it. She said, well, Geoffrey, then you need to. And I really appreciate her point around that the only way we can be anti-racist is to talk about race. We all walk around with racist beliefs. We're socialized to be racist. I don't like that fact, but we've got to work on it. So we're going to talk about race today, and we're going to talk about it in the context of mindsets. Our field right now is continuing to, but sort of at an inflection point, I think, in having a conversation and a reckoning with race. Many of you know that the history around Terman and the first longitudinal study of giftedness had some really kind of terrible eugenic motivations around it. If you look across the fields of psychology and medicine, you find similar things in that period coming from lots of scholars. We have to use their work, we have to build on their work, but we have to acknowledge that there were motivations to things that started our field that were kind of terrible. The organization to which we are an affiliate, the National Association for Gifted Children, their most recent issue of Gifted Child Quarterly was originally going to be sort of a tribute to the legacy of Terman and the Terman longitudinal study. And the board backed away from that. They issued instead a really lovely statement. If you haven't read it, I do encourage you to go there. That all gifted students won't matter until all Black gifted students matter. And that NAGC will not endorse, support, or engage in any action that reinforces, promotes, or advances racism or racist movements, including but not limited to racial microaggressions, colorblind ideology, culture-blind policies and practices, and scientific racism in scholarship. I'm so proud to be part of NAGC for this statement that they've put out. And frankly, I'm really proud to be part of NMAG too. Chris Van, the new president, penned a wonderful statement backing NAGC that we must use our position as educators to unequivocally declare that Black Lives Matter and do things about it. When we're talking about color, when we're talking about class, when we're talking about education, we all come to that with beliefs about ability of different kinds. I would like for you all to take, I'm gonna really honestly give you 5 minutes. I'm gonna run a timer on this, okay? And feel free to unmute and chat while we're doing this. But in the text chat, I'd like for you to respond to one of these 3 questions. You can respond to more if you want, but really meaningfully respond to one of these 3 questions. And use the number to do it so we can index that for later. I'm gonna drive Corey crazy, like trying to kind of keep track of this and refer back to these as we go through the rest of the presentation, but pick one to respond to in chat. What is the difference between ability and achievement? What is a bigger determinant of success, work or ability? How much effect can you have on your students' success? All right, I'm gonna run my 5-minute timer. Please feel free to talk about this on open mic if you like. But I'd like for everybody to get at least one meaningful answer in chat. Go.
And Gio, just to double check with you, sir, I'm still seeing your original intro slide. Have you moved on from that?
Oh my gosh, I have. And
I don't know if it's the same for everybody else. But
it says my screen sharing is paused. Oh, okay, so let me fix that. How does it pause? Okay.
there
Can
you go.
See that better now?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
For us visual learners, that's very helpful. So I appreciate you having the
Totally.
questions there.
All right. Sorry about that, you guys. Need to watch my control panel a little more carefully. Got Katrina, got Helen. And I'm just going to remind everybody, please put the number of the question that you're responding to before your response so that it's easy for Corey to kind of collate the responses and see where people are approaching the conversation. Got about 3 minutes left. I love the thinking you guys are putting into this. anybody going to respond to question 3? Oh, there we go. Thanks, Patricia. Miley, excellent. Becky, awesome. And Corey, as you're looking back on these, I'm noticing that Courtney followed the instructions, but she gave answers to all 3 in one block. So you may have to tear those apart.
Can do.
There's nothing to be sorry for, Courtney. It's all good. Yeah, and that's a definitional question, I guess, Billy. I am thinking about how much impact maybe is a clearer way that I could have phrased that question. This is actually one of the only things that I enjoy about doing this stuff over Zoom as opposed to face-to-face. It's a lot easier than the stack of sticky notes that we would do this with in the classroom.
Well, Geoffrey, we do have digital tools to make that easier now, even if you're doing it in person.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, you guys. That's time up. So I'm going to move on. If you still have stuff you want to post, go ahead and get that in there. And Corey, I'm going to address each of these 3 questions over the course of the talk. So if it's possible for you to sort of tear these apart, find themes, I'd really appreciate that. Okay.
Sounds good. I can do that, sir.
Thank you. I really want to start with the second question here, because I think this is the question that in education, we most typically are addressing when we're talking about mindsets and belief about ability right now, which is a bigger determinant of success, work, or ability. I'm interested in what it means if you attribute more success to work than to ability. And what I saw in the chat is that a lot of you guys encourage your students to apply themselves, to apply their work, to not rest on the fact that they've been classified capable in some way, which of course we do when we move kids into gifted education. Corey, what do you see as themes in here about how folks responded to question 2? I didn't give you much time.
That's okay. Let me take a look here. I'm kind of separating them in a Word document right now.
Sounds good.
I'm seeing a lot about work and work ethic.
Yeah, yeah. So we talk more about work than we talk about ability. And we encourage our kids to work. We don't encourage our kids to able. I'm going to read you guys Midge's comment. Work is a better determinant. Grit, the willingness to stick with something beyond our comfort level, is key. Hard work is often thought of as being 2 4-letter words together. That's why in many ways, the Renzulli definition of gifted is more accurate. You don't need to be a genius to be successful. Too many 130 people in prison, but above average ability and persistence combined is what makes the difference. So Midge, I think what you're getting at there is sort of the definition of giftedness as an effect. Marion says work is the bigger determinant of, I assume, of success. Nicole says hard work pays off, sort of the old work ethic stuff that I was brought up with in the Midwest. Amy says you have to do the work. You can have all the potential and ability, but effort and work is what's going to make that happen. Michael says it depends on the balance and the milieu. Michael, what do you mean by that?
Well, we need to use both our talent and our opportunities to create a good product.
So it's contextual. That makes sense. That makes sense. Corey, are there other themes you're seeing here that I'm not speaking to?
Let's see, thus far, most of what I'm seeing, Geoffrey, is a whole lot about work. I mean, almost everything I see for the second question has the word work encapsulated within it.
So here's my question. Why do we identify kids for their ability? If we talk about work all the time, if we think that work is the thing that creates success, why is it ability that we use to identify kids for our programming? Nicole, you raised your hand. Unmute and talk.
The way I see it, we identify kids for what they are capable of doing and the push that they need and the challenges that they require in their education, but that doesn't necessarily equate to, as you were talking about, success. Because I can be the best piano player in the world, but if I don't practice and I don't do anything with it, I'm not going to get anywhere with my musical talent.
Yeah. And to Michael's point, of course, you also have to have a piano, right? In order to be a good piano player. You need the milieu and the practice there to enable that. Dweck has all these mindset prompts that I think we know pretty well at this point. You have a certain amount of intelligence and you can't really do much to change it. If you strongly agree with that, then you're agreeing with more of an abilitist mindset. If you disagree with that, you're agreeing with a work mindset. Your intelligence is something about you that you can't change very much. If you agree with that, then you're agreeing with the fixed mindset. If you disagree with that, then of course you're agreeing more with the flexible or growth mindset. And of course, there are curricula that have been developed around mindsets. These are some of the statements that I think have been replicated in curriculum over time. What about a student who works hard and doesn't do well? I'd say, I like the effort you put in. Let's work some more and figure out what you don't understand. When we praise process, then we help to keep the student focused. And if we praise ability, we might be getting them off track, making them think about their, the reason they're there, the reason we think they're capable instead of the work that they need to do. There have been some responses to this that I think are unfortunate in our field. Some popular, if unsupported, conclusions. One is to ignore ability. I have no ability to play basketball. I am a relatively chubby, short person. No, and that's not true. I have some ability to play basketball. I have no ability to get really good at it, right? And I didn't start early enough in life to be, a great point guard or something. It would be kind of silly to talk to me about hard work and try to get me to be a better basketball player. Would you guys agree? Yeah, you don't have to agree that emphatically, Katrina. I think that ignoring ability is kind of silly. And I have met some teachers who actively antagonize against kids who are labeled as gifted because they think that the gifted label somehow has a detrimental effect on their work. Like it or not, ability does make a difference, just as it would make a difference for me if I wanted to be a basketball player, which fortunately I don't. We can't ignore who kids are, what they have, what they're coming to the conversation with. And I think sometimes conversations about mindset in the Dweck fashion can actually be somewhat unkind to kids who are frankly in the room because they have ability, right? Also in our field, there's been some research on whether or not this labeling effect actually somehow creates a detriment to kids' mindsets. And there's a recent study, 2018, Mofield and Parker Peters, that absolutely establishes that gifted kids are not likely to have any worse mindsets than anyone else. So we have some evidence that labeling them does not create that effect. When people have looked at whether doing stuff around mindset, doing direct instruction around it has any effect, there is a small effect. It tends to be most pronounced for kids who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but it falls below Hattie's threshold for stuff to care about. It falls in the kind of what he would call the just because you're trying level of effect, very small. And when we look at the way that different kinds of mindsets going beyond Dweck's mindset to what Midge was talking about earlier, things like grit and engagement, they do have small positive effects on test scores, on GPA, and positive effects on mental health. So there's something worth paying attention to, but I'm not sure there's something that's worth talking about a whole lot, especially if there's going to be a negative effect. And I'm not sure if there's something that's worth teaching directly to kids, at least not for much time. It maybe makes more sense to talk about it a little bit and then get on with doing the hard work. I want to talk about mindset in a different way for a second. I want to talk about our mindset as a state, because fundamentally, our beliefs about ability fuel what we do in gifted ed. We identify kids for ability. We generally don't identify them for work, although that can be part of the equation, I think, if you read the rules in a certain way. The access denied or missingness report that came out of Purdue, that Dr. Ann Gray and Dr. Marcia Gentry, who were both part of our conference yesterday, helped author, gave this summary about New Mexico's state of identification, which in effect is what we've done with ability, the work that we have done around ability. New Mexico identified 16,239 students as gifted in 2016, and that's the last data that's available. Statewide, the number of missing students in schools that do not identify and in schools that under-identify ranges from 6,211 to 23,801. Now, those numbers, you guys, equate to a third of the gifted kids in the state to more than half, almost 2/3 of the gifted kids in the state are not identified. And most of those students come from Title I schools and underserved populations. What do those actions say about us as a state? Do we not have the ability to identify the kids? Have we not done the work? I've been part of, and I'm kind of ashamed of the effects that we've had on identification over the past 15 years. We have identified 464 more American Indian kids, 295 more Asian kids, 3,893 more Latinx kids, 26 more Black kids, and our overall identification of white kids has dropped. But those all follow the population trends of our state. So the representation of those groups has not changed as much as it should. And in fact, our Asian group, which is overrepresented or very well represented, some people would say, across the country, has actually increased. If we look at national trends, what we see is that we're a part of a system that is doing this, all right? If you look at Asian American representation in gifted education, it has stayed pretty steady. The same is true for white representation or European American representation, Latinx representation. You see these flat bars. And we've been working on this as a state, and the country's been working on it. This has been the primary focus of Javits grants, of the one of the primary focuses of the National Association for Gifted Children. It's not like we haven't been working, right? Do we have the ability? Or are we just approaching the problem wrong? The Access Denied report goes a little bit deeper into this. We have some stuff to be proud of. We actually have a relatively high level of access to gifted education across our schools, but it's much better in non-Title I schools than in Title I schools. Socioeconomic equity over the 3-year trended period in that report actually decreased. We had a more classist system in 2015, 2016, or a more classist effect in 2015, 2016 than we did in 2011 through 2014. And when you break this down across racial barriers, racial and ethnic barriers, you see these total numbers that I talked about before, but you see their huge impact on our Latinx population and on our Indigenous Native population. Those are kids that we're not serving. Corey, what are the themes you see and what people say about the difference between achievement and ability?
Let me get back up to that. We're getting a lot of great responses here, Gio. This is great.
I know, they're awesome.
I love this. Thank you all for participating so well. I'm seeing a lot that kind of encapsulates, and I lost whose it was, but I thought they worded it well. Ability is what is possible, and achievement is what is shown.
Okay. Okay.
Ability is similar to potential, what somebody is capable of. Achievement more is a product and what has been done, and that's kind of tends to be the overwhelming theme here from the responses that I'm getting.
Okay. Well, I would like to ask the question, what if ability and achievement are words that we use to parse different tests or different concepts, but if they're not actually that different? There's a study done by Betsy McCoach and her peers looking at an older longitudinal data set, oh gosh, I'm going to lose it right now. Came out of a city in California where they actually tracked babies. They got a group of babies to engage in this longitudinal, it's the Fullerton, sorry, longitudinal data set. They got parents to volunteer to sign their kids up for this, and they tracked them through early childhood, through school, off into life as they actually went across the country. What they found, what they were looking for at the time were trends in ability, trends in motivation specifically. Dr. McCoach reanalyzed this data to look for what were the determinants of achievement at any given level. What she found was that ability was very important in determining achievement when kids were little. But that once they passed their early years, if I remember correctly, it's about age 7, achievement at one grade level almost determined all of the achievement at the next grade level. And these are using the Woodcock-Johnson highly standardized test. So we might see some differences with different measures, but the overall trend is so consistent that I think it's really important for us to pay attention to this. What is determining your success as a 5th grader is your success as a 4th grader, all right? Your achievements as a 4th grader determine your achievements as a 5th grader. Now, I think that has some profound implications for gifted education. We identify kids usually using more ability kinds of measures. But in fact, it's what kids already know and are able to do that has the biggest determination on their ability to do things at a different grade level. How much effect can you have on your student success? Corey, what are our themes?
Well, Geoffrey, thanks for asking. I'm seeing things a lot about relationships, setting up opportunities for them, giving them space to help them with their success, influence, providing sparks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kind of the overwhelming theme seems to be opportunity and influence, inspiration maybe.
Okay, opportunity, influence, inspiration. Is there anything in there about teaching?
Oh, let's see.
About direct instruction?
Looking through, man, so many responses. I'm looking through dozens of these things right now.
I was looking for one that was about actually teaching kids skill and knowledge, and I didn't see any.
Scanning through, nothing is jumping out.
Yeah. So here's the question I want to ask you guys, and I'm gonna let Corey keep looking for that nugget that I thought might pop up, but I was worried wouldn't. When we identify kids because of their ability, I think we make some assumptions about them and about ourselves. We make assumptions about what they can do without us. We make assumptions about our role, and I'm not sure they're correct. If you followed Hattie's visible learning research over the years, he's been looking, and I've referred to him before, for things that we can do in school that have large effects, effects that are really going to move the needle, effects that really mean that we're not just trying harder at that particular moment. And in some recent publication, what he's talked about is the effect of something called collective teacher efficacy, whether we're really feeling as teachers like something is happening. Now, this is a little bit circular, perhaps, right? If we feel like things are going well, then things are going well, right? If we feel like we're having an impact, we're having an impact. But it turns out that that impact is very large. It's more than an effect size of 1 even, more than an additional year of teaching. And so I want to focus on how we can get to Hattie's collective self-efficacy, things that the research says that we can do. I was in a recent a leadership conference this summer. I don't remember who said this. It may have been Dr. Jonathan Way who said this, that in gifted education, we have many things that we like to do, and not many of them are supported by the research. What is supported by the research is early enrichment, because that's where the ability matters most, is when the kids are little. Front loading or teaching scaffolded content, directly instructing what kids need to have to get into more advanced coursework. Culturally relevant content, so they feel like it matters to them. We heard that powerful example in Dr. Gallagher's presentation yesterday about the kid who walked into the parent who said, why would I want my kid in that class if they don't feel welcome? Local norms with universal screening and grouping of kids. If you want to look for an example of the possible impact of early identification, I really strongly encourage you to read up on the Young Scholars Program. This is a program that was run in Fairfax County, Virginia, and was an identification-free enrichment program. So this is a little bit like what Albuquerque Public Schools is doing around the school-wide enrichment model, but it's provided for every kid, open enrollment, going into regular education classes with littles, so that they are taught that they can think for themselves, that they can come up with their own right answers. They're taught to ask the questions. They're taught that they should be the ones to provide the knowledge. And then their teachers are shown directly what that looks like, which is very important, because kids who are seen are kids who are responded to. If you want to look for an example of front loading and scaffolded content, you can look to our major gifted education publishers. But what you'll find there in curricula like Mentoring Mathematical Minds or the William and Mary Language Arts series are curricula that you need to teach day after day. They're not things that you can just expose kids to on one day and have a massive impact. A curriculum that is gaining some serious traction in our state, because we've become a college board state in our high school exit exams, is the College Board Springboard program. This is a program that was actually designed for use with any kid, rather than just kids who are selected for high ability, but which has some very demonstrated effectiveness with leveling kids up so they're ready for an AP course or an IB course, frankly. I should back up. IB has its own program, the middle years program, but it's similar. I'd like for you guys to look at these questions. And I like these questions for thinking about the difference between a program of instruction for gifted kids that emphasizes teaching them skills versus one that just exposes them to things or sees whether they like to do things. And I know you guys use logic puzzles sometimes. These are items from the Cornell class reasoning test. It's a test that was developed in the 1960s. Can anyone answer question 31 real quick? Just unmute and do it. I'm going to ask you for a reason, but
Yes.
hit it.
Yes. A.
Okay, why is it true?
If all cats fly, then they are animals that can fly. And if all animals that fly are black, then all cats are black.
Good. Now, I knew you could do that, Katrina, because almost all people our age can, all right? There's another test, and these are free, you can get them on the web, that goes into conditional reasoning, or what some people would call propositional reasoning. So suppose you know that there are black cats only if there are pink cats, and there are black cats. Then would this be true that there are pink cats? Oh, somebody want to chime in, give an answer? These are harder.
Yes.
Tell me why.
So you're setting up, there can only be one if there are another. There is the other, so there has to be the first piece.
Right. Pink cats are the precondition to black cats. Okay, very good. What Ennis, who's actually one of our founding fathers of critical thinking instruction, established with these tests was that kind of formal reasoning will naturally occur in most kids, late middle school for classification reasoning, high school for conditional reasoning or propositional reasoning. But they can be effectively taught in elementary school and middle school. And when I think about how heavily loaded the SAT is with critical thinking content, and when I think about the critical thinking skills that underprivileged kids come to education with, I think we have a mandate to teach this. I also think that it's really interesting to ask the question, do these questions look like ability questions or achievement questions? They look like ability questions, right? But if they can be taught, then they're achievement questions. I think we should be teaching this stuff. Of course, we need culturally responsive schools. The literature really well establishes that we need to have multiple cultures represented in our literature, that we need multicultural competence. So we're responding to kids in the way that they respond to us in useful ways. And that the fact that 80% of our teacher workforce being white is problematic. We need to recruit, we need to build, we need to retain more teachers who are from underrepresented groups, who are people of color. And to get kids into the program, we have to do local norming in order to get equitable identification and in order to find the kids to put in the groups to teach them, right? I mean, these pieces are interlocking. And I think that's a no-brainer, right? You have to have kids who need kind of the same thing in order to teach them, and you have to find them to put them in the group. I'm not sure how well this resolves, but if you guys have not gone to the racial dot map site, you should just spend some time digging in this, okay? So this is a map ostensibly just of race in Santa Fe, but it's also a map of socioeconomic status. Can anybody quickly guess how you can discern socioeconomic status from the racial dots on this map? Come on. Look close. Can you guys read this okay on your screen? Or is it hard to read? I'm getting a meh. Okay.
It's a little pixelated.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not gonna like ask you guys to see what you can't see. The blue dots are further apart. What does it mean if the orangish Hispanic dots are tightly clustered and on top of each other, and the blue dots are all spaced out?
The blue dots can
Do that again, Kelly.
the blue dots can afford more property. The
That's
yellow
right.
dots, they have to live on top of each other.
That's right. That's right.
Segregation.
Well, of course you're seeing segregation there, Midge. Yeah, you see those tight clusters of different racial groups. Yeah, absolutely. And if we go to Albuquerque, we see racial groups that are clustered. We see some racial groups that are living in far denser circumstances than others. If we go to Las Cruces, we see the same thing. This space up here that just looks like it's a little bit grayer, that's blue dots. This is Gallup. I put it in because I used to live there. Here actually we have a bunch of folks who are classified with the brown dot, which is what's used for Native American populations. This is Los Alamos. What do you notice about Los Alamos?
It's where the
It's mostly white.
research lab is.
Well, yes, we know that, but that's not on this map. What do you guys notice from the visual?
It looks like it's mostly white from what we can see.
Yeah, it's mostly white. It's mostly white. It's an anomaly in our state for sure. I'm going to give you guys a second to read this. This is an excerpt from a story that was in the Albuquerque Journal, September this year. I see Midge leaning in, so I'm going to read it to you as well. Los Alamos High School senior Isaac Romero of Espanola described his first day at the middle school as nerve-wracking. He's been academically successful at Los Alamos, but still had to make a transition at first. Romero said he likes all of those features, and there's an ellipsis that should be there because they talk about having more extracurricular activities at Los Alamos than he could have gotten down in Espanola. But he's noticed that other students from the Valley who find it hard to keep up. Quote, I've noticed a lot of kids from the Valley, the Los Alamos public school system does put them into slower paced classes, he said, adding he doesn't see many taking AP classes like him. Stephen Bertinger, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Stephen, another school board member said he's not surprised students from low performing schools have difficulty adjusting, but there's no easy fix. Could we do something? I think the answer to that is technically yes, he said, but then it's extremely difficult to execute. All right, I'd encourage you to read the rest of this article. It talks very specifically about gifted ed. And it's actually clear to me that Los Alamos is paying attention to its ratios of kids in different racial groups, kids in different, kids who are out of district versus in district, and how they're participating in gifted ed and AP classes. But some of the results, I don't know, they break my heart a little bit. And I don't think that this is a Los Alamos issue. I think that this is an exponent, perhaps, of what we see throughout the state. How common is this story in New Mexico? The kid who wants to get into the advanced class, but isn't prepared for it, right? Maybe not because they're not able, but because they haven't been taught, don't have the skills, so they're not ready. I want to close by asking you guys where we want to go. Because I think fundamentally in gifted ed, we have to make need about the future. So some of you guys know James Borland from Teachers College Columbia. He's one of the proponents of, or at least at some points, he's been a proponent of not identifying gifted kids of just providing gifted education for everybody, all right? And he wrote a monograph for the old National Research Center on Gifted Education. One way the schools serve to maintain the status quo and the current power structure, according to social reproduction theory, is by denying an adequate education to the poor and the non-white, and by extending special privileges to the more affluent. Gifted education is seen by some as an instrument of social reproduction and one of the means whereby schools perpetuate racism and economic injustice. Sapon-Shevin writes, whether or not the intention of gifted programs is to reproduce existing economic and racial hierarchies or to produce cultural capital held by an elite group of students, these are in fact the consequences of such a system. And we know that we live in a racist society. We know that we've got racist systems. I would hold that if we do not move the needle on who's in gifted ed and on what we're doing to prepare them, then we are simply replicating the society we have. I'd ask too, who should we train as leaders and how? I know lots of gifted ed teachers. We talk about preparing kids for the future. We talk about preparing kids to change the world, to be the inventors, the problem solvers of the future. What if they're all white? It's not okay. The point is that giftedness as a concept, as a label in the schools, and ultimately as a descriptor of certain adults, is likely to reflect the values and strengths of the dominant culture and to slight those of other cultures, especially those of involuntary minorities, people who are racialized, who employ such secondary cultural differences as cultural inversion as a means to define and protect their identities. Now, here's the other side of this, all right? I don't want to be all dark. There's research on helping kids to be less racist. And it seems to suggest that just like language exposure before the age of 12, if kids are exposed to the faces of kids from other races, kids who don't look like them before the age of 12, they tend to be insulated against otherizing those kids. They think of them as more like them and less like other. So I want to ask you guys, you can visualize in your head what it looks like when you have a small group of gifted kids you're working with in your schools. If that group looks homogeneous, what are we programming the kids for? If that group looks like the total community, what are we programming them for? And I'd ask too, whether maybe we can just use gifted ed to fix ourselves. Both teachers and non-teachers hold pro-white, explicit and implicit racial biases. I hate this article. I hate this article. It's true. The evidence is pretty substantial. Furthermore, differences between teachers and non-teachers were negligible or insignificant. We teachers, we as the teacher population, are walking around as racist as everybody else in our society, at least by measures of implicit bias and explicit actions. Differences in Latinx versus white participation in gifted ed can be explained by differences on test scores. And that might have to do with the way that Latinx kids are prepared before they're tested for gifted ed. However, differences in Black participation are better explained when race of the teacher is included. So this research study done at Vanderbilt established that if a Black child had a Black teacher, they were far more likely to be participating in gifted ed than if they had a white teacher. The only thing you can use to explain that is race. Now, just a quick show of chat. How many of you guys have taken one of the implicit bias tests from Implicit at Harvard? Give me some yeses and nos.
I have, Geoffrey.
You want to just tell people about it real quick, Katrina?
So they investigate just little things that you might not think of as racist, or actions that you think.
Yeah, And the way it works is they show you two pictures, and they compare your reaction time to classifying the people according to some sort of good, bad, right, kind of continuum. But the people are of different races. And the theory behind implicit bias suggests that we have some deep programming that allows us to make very automatic responses about certain groups. And that in order to make a good response about somebody that is an other in our minds, in our programming, it takes more time, okay? Implicit bias doesn't make somebody bad, but it does add up to a system where we very automatically pick Katrina to be part of our group. And since she's already picked, she took a spot that somebody else might have taken. Does that make sense? And it may be, this is theoretical at this point, because implicit bias tests tend to change over time, that implicit bias is more about a very specific situation than it is about the individual that holds it. So in as much as we're looking for ways to move forward, to change our mindsets about our country, about our world, about gifted education, I think it might just be that if the group of kids coming into our gifted ed pullout groups, into our gifted ed classes, getting gifted ed services in various ways, looked like the whole school, it might just even train the adults. It might just make us better people, along with helping the kids. I want you guys to imagine equity as excellence. And I'm the guy who argued for replacing equity and excellence with equity is excellence in our title. And here's why. What if we took our student population and we found that extra third to 2/3 of kids who are out there who should be receiving services? We found them and we developed them as our next generation of leaders, scientists, artists. What if those are the kids with this vast variety of beliefs and attitudes who are raising the next generation? And what if our schools manifestly said over and over and over again, giftedness is in every group, every day. It's not something that is any way bent toward a certain group. Wouldn't that be a lesson? Wouldn't that be a kind of excellence for our state? I drafted, partially at Chris Vian's behest, a bill that is an extension of work that NMAG's been doing for a long time, a lot of it with Christine Trujillo as a sponsor, trying to improve the statute in our state around gifted education. And we've submitted a draft bill that does a couple of things. One, it expands identification. It does not allow for there to be any single gatekeeper. So you can't put an IQ test or a teacher nomination or a parent nomination in front of qualification. No single gatekeepers are allowed. Two, it includes leadership and artistry and specific academic areas as areas of qualification to broaden the number of domains of giftedness that kids can exhibit. And very specifically so that if a community or a culture values those things more than they value, say, critical thinking, they can identify kids according to their cultural norms. There is a mandate to serve, which does not exist in law right now. There's a mandate to identify, but not one to serve. Thank you for the warning, Corey. And there's a mandate to serve for twice exceptional kids, for kids who have IDEA or 504 qualifications. It specifically allows them to get some ancillary services, which they may need. And very powerfully, it requires accountability at the district level and at the state level to look at equity of identification, equity of outcome, expenditure of gifted education funds. They're not required to be used. It's not a categorical funding, but it is a required audit point. and programming quality. Now, I want you to imagine this. What would happen if your principal had to read the NAGC standards before they came down the hall to look at what you do? You think you might get some more time with your kids? Some more time to do that powerful front loading? That's what I hope for. We have to fight racism and classism individually and systematically by seeing students more equitably. We have to fix our eyes. We have to serve students in gifted education earlier and more completely. We've got to get away from, don't hear me wrong, relationship is important, opportunity is important, encouragement, inspiration, those are important. So is teaching, and we are teachers, and we need to teach them skills or knowledge because other people aren't. And finally, if we're talking about mindsets, we have to attend to our own mindsets at least as much as we attend to those of our students. So we give our students good examples of people who are working hard to generate equity, just like they need to in their society when they grow up, and providing challenges so that they can enjoy working hard. I provided you guys with an email from me if you'd like to join, if you'd like to talk more about this, frankly, or if you'd like to join our legislative effort to try to improve our statute. We need advocates, we need voices, we need to get together on this. Thanks, you guys. There's a list of resources at the end. I'm sure we'll put this out in a PDF at some point. We have just a couple of minutes left. Any questions or comments?
Wow, Geoffrey, thank you so much. I don't know about everybody else. If it was not for being on crutches, there were quite a few times there I wanted to jump out of my seat and shout amen. Well said, sir. We didn't actually have very many questions other than a lot of folks asking about how to support the bill, which I believe Chris is handling in the chat.
Great.
And folks that just kind of want to make sure that they can get their hands on the content that you provided in this slide, because there's a lot of good info. So
I know we have some way to do this, and I'll render it as a PDF to get it to you guys, okay?
Thank you so much, Geoffrey. We appreciate you and everything that you do.
Appreciate you guys being here.